very happy to talk to you both, Ben and Karl, the founders of the conversion optimization agency Conversion Rate Experts, and also authors of the book Making Websites Win. Yeah, so I got your book, and this was also one of the reasons to reach out to you guys, because I'm doing a special research for airline conversion optimization, and I couldn't find of any better expert to provide advice than the authors of the special book. And if I'm not mistaken, you guys also are one of the people who started the CRO term back in 2007. Yes.
That's right. Yes, it
Yes.
was originally actually we trademarked it because it was the name we named our system that, and then it we became like a general use term. So yeah, I think we still might technically own a trademark for it, but maybe I don't know if we might have let it lapse. I can't remember.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's great. So looking back, because I think you trademarked that term 10 years ago or 11 years ago. If you
Yeah.
look back and in this last 11 years and now up to now, with the plenty of CRO real project that you guys did in the book, how far did you do you think that the whole CRO, let's say, industry or the discipline has come?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more sophisticated. When we started, we used to speak at web marketing conferences, and our first slide was explaining to people what conversion meant, and we had like a definition. And to lots of most web marketers at the time, it was a brand new term that they hadn't heard of before, and so that's changed. And also back then, most websites, it's hard to remember, but most websites were kind of broken in some way. It was almost every checkout process had something that would only a genius could actually work out how to make their way through it. So yeah, it's surprising when we look back at screenshots from those days as to how much more sophisticated the web is and how much less broken the web is. But still, having said that, still most websites are far from optimal. Most websites still, people still struggle with websites. You only have to do a user test to see how difficult users still find it to actually make decisions. But the level of difficulty is different from what it used to be.
Yeah. Now, if I refer to our industry, to the airline industry, I still see examples of websites, like you said, that is almost impossible to complete the booking. But there are also some there that are quite good. Yes, so I think
Actually, I would say, not wanting to criticize anyone, but then clearly going ahead and doing so. I'd say the airline industry is, the typical user experience for buying flights is still quite bad. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's not just the experience too, it's the kind of how persuasive these websites are. And even if a website's got amazing user experience, so how confident are you to actually buy that service or to book that trip? And quite often you leave a website with a hell of a lot of questions around, well, are they really the best service provider? What are their hidden catches? Do they have these kind of upsells and cross-sells that I'm not aware of yet? How do I know that they've got a good reputation? So I'd say the usability of websites has improved, well, somewhat. But again, most websites still aren't particularly persuasive or reassuring when it comes to actually booking. There's still that nervousness when you put your credit card details in, thinking, have I made a mistake here? Or is this the right company for me?
Absolutely.
So, and when we talk exactly about that, not only about making websites work, but making a persuasive website that addresses all the friction points and also motivates people to do the purchase. It's what you call this scientific approach to website design and optimization. What do you think are now currently the key bottlenecks for companies that want to start with that process? What do you think that so many still don't do it?
I think the first one is that people still don't understand why it's such a good idea. I'd say even some companies some companies who've done it and had loads of success with it only notice in retrospect what a difference it made to the economics of the business. In our book, there's a section called the Power Law of CRO, where we actually explain in like mathematical terms, like economic terms, why a 20% increase in conversion rate on a page has much more than a 20% increase in the business's profits. And I think until we first released that, we first released that as an article last summer. I would say until then, I'd never seen an explanation in maths terms as to why conversion is why profits are surprisingly sensitive, like really surprisingly sensitive to conversion. And I think that's something that most businesses, not just in the airline industry, but most businesses still don't really get it, that a 10% increase in profit can make the difference between being loss-making and profit-making.
So basically, because of people failing to understand this equation, the double effect of conversion that has both on the revenue and the cost, they still mostly invest money in marketing, in getting more people to websites, like in digital advertising. Is this what you're seeing?
Absolutely. It's the fact that when conversion's done right, the unit costs of acquiring a customer become. If your conversion rate increases, you can go from not being able to afford, say, paid search traffic, to being able to be hugely profitable on it. And once you're profitable on it, then you can afford to buy more, which brings economies of scale. And we're talking here about gross profit. So then the effect on, because most web businesses are platform businesses where the fixed costs are relatively significant, then the economies of scale are huge. So it all has roll-on effects. There's a little diagram in our book. I don't know if you're allowed to publish that diagram in your.
Yeah,
in your
I will
report.
share it in the article.
You wanted to, because we'd be happy to let you have the text from that if you wanted to somehow give it away to users.
Yeah.
Because it's important to the whole web design industry, really, because it's the most important phenomenon in web design, and no one seems to know it actually.
And you think?
Weirdly, financial directors they get it straight away because they're used to scenario sensitivity modeling and scenario modeling. Yeah. So FDs get it straight away because that's the language they speak. But weirdly, it's actually more arduous to explain it to a marketing director often.
So if I relate this to the survey, the research that we do with Dig and Travel, which is basically where we analyze the state of the airlines, and we will analyze 38 airlines in this year's survey. And I see two groups of airlines. Ones that are at the beginning of this journey and still don't understand it, It's like having trouble to convince to start, to get stakeholders buy-in. And there is a second group which understand it, build their team, but they now struggle how to scale, how to do more, how to do literally experiments at a large scale. So if I go back to this first group, I think understanding this economics and this equation, this formula that you set, and then I think this is the key to getting the approvals and the resources, which many people say, I don't have the resources, I cannot get the funds from the FD. This is what I think is what you are trying to tell, yes? If you understand this equation, then it shouldn't be that difficult to convince your FD to get the resources.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting in an industry like travel is you kind of got two, as you mentioned, you've got two different segments of business. You've got kind of the airlines that were traditionally created as offline businesses and worked through travel agents and kind of offline marketing, brand marketing, all that side of things. And they're typically organizations that are like operationally kind of offline, for want of a better word. And then when you look at the new kind of wave of companies in travel, companies like Expedia, Google, hotels.com, booking.com, all these different travel organizations, Airbnb, who are kind of taking the market share, they're just a very different type of business. And, no one at Google's having to go and find budget to run experiments. or to work on the user experience, or to get data to understand how to improve their website. So one challenge I think the airline industry has is, especially kind of the more traditional companies in this market, is they don't necessarily have the culture and the expertise in-house in order to run the kind of experiments, in order to get the kind of data, in order to make the decisions. Because in reality, if they don't have the budget, if they can't persuade the CFO to invest in a better user experience and to invest in tools to help them measure whether a change to a website has improved sales or decreased sales, then they don't stand a chance against the type of companies that are being created today.
No.
And it's similar in industries, it's similar in finance and media and publishing. Retail obviously has already been through this. Companies like Blockbusters versus Netflix. So
I agree. And this background, like you said, even within the airlines, there are the LCCs, the low-cost airlines, some of the new ones that the e-commerce is the only channel, and they have more this, let's say, mindset. And for some, where e-commerce is still one of the channels, and it's 20 or 30% of the sales, then this mindset and the history and the whole organization, it's much more difficult.
Yes.
So I agree. Yeah, great observation. And
let's
say the ones that do understand, or they would like to start, and let's say, but are still at the beginning. What would you advise? How to start? How to do maybe the first test, or how to go about the CRO?
I guess the obvious one is to kind of be clear across the whole organization as to the metrics that are important to measure success, because it's no good running out there and getting a split testing tool if you're not testing the right stuff. And it needs to be discussed at a senior level, and it's a strategic decision. It's, where do we want this business to be in 5-10 years time? Where do we see it going? Because too many, especially large organizations, they'll end up optimizing things like click-through rate, or kind of these micro conversions that might help them improve the website mildly, or might help them get some statistically significant results, but don't really change the business itself. So the first thing that we say to our clients is, what's your vision for the company? Where do you see you competing in the future? What market are you trying to dominate, and how are you going to dominate this market? And what are the real core metrics in your business that mean that you'll be able to measure your progress to that goal? And it really does start with measurement. Once a company's got an idea for what they should be measuring, the next thing to look at is, well, what's working and what isn't? And on a website, that can be pretty simple. You can see which parts of your funnel people drop out at. You can see the areas where you might get a high volume of customer service complaints or customer service calls. You get to see on review sites the things that people do and don't like about your service. So it's really kind of understanding your position in the marketplace alongside why your customers currently use you and why qualified prospects don't use you. And that's tough with a website, because you don't necessarily interact with these people, and it takes a while to kind of create that tacit knowledge, especially if you're just relying on web analytics data. And a large proportion of the book is dedicated to how do you really understand your visitors and your customers, so that you can design pages or user experiences that are better than the ones that they're currently experiencing.
No.
Not straightforward.
I understand, and like you said, I love the examples because of the ways that people can get feedback from, because analytics is the obvious, thing to look at first. But I think one luxury or one advantage that most of the airlines have is that they have websites with immense amount of traffic and users. So even running ad hoc, my experience when we did some optimization project, even running ad hoc service, like you said, asking people why didn't buy, or what was the key pain points, looking at the reviews. It's a lot of data, but like you said, I think it's trying to optimize it for the core, the true metrics, and don't then use these learnings and stuff just to do like these small hacks and optimize for not relevant metrics.
A quick tip, we've done a lot of work in travel, and we've gone and rented space in airports for the day to conduct usability tests. show people the website, to watch people going through the process. And it's kind of a quick win. I mean, we've even done user tests on airline stewards and stewardesses, haven't we? And literally on the planes themselves, just watching customers go through the process. In airport stores, we've conducted trials and user tests. So kind of just getting in front of the customers, listening to them, watching them. There's no excuse if you're in the travel industry. There's plenty of people sitting around waiting for something to happen. We'll see some user tests.
And in terms, like you said, the culture and the change, so for the airlines or the ones that are starting to build their teams, the CRO teams, usually what I see, at least part of the expertise or part of the, let's say, the team, we also see this in the surveys, usually outsourced, with the company's experts like you guys.
Yes.
So what do you think also when they try to install a CRO champion or a process leader in-house, and then some people, and then coordinating with an agency, what do you see are the core skills of a good CRO expert or of a person who would be like managing the program in-house?
The first section, as far as the core skills, I'd say lots of it. There's two levels of persuasion. One is actually persuading the customers to become visitors, and the other is persuading within the organization that this is worthwhile and to actually communicate and persuade the benefits. And so we always say, don't underestimate, yes, it's important for every page to have a compelling, persuasive headline. That is what the user wants. But then don't forget that you don't just switch those skills off when you come to announcing to the team or to the management what you've achieved. That there's still the persuasion and the championing of it within the organization, showing knowing enough about the business to be able to show it in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, in terms of like mitigating the risk by showing that we're running this test, and if it gets a 10% improvement or 20% improvement, here's what it'll be worth. If it loses, then here's what it'll cost us, and the likelihoods. There's a lot to be said for educating people, and also showing it as, like, in the same way a process engineer would show optimizations in terms of the risk, the cost, the likelihood of success, the cost of implementation, the time of implementation, and selling the whole company on this lean, iterative approach where realistically no one's taking anything like the risk that they would in a different approach. Because the great thing about A/B testing is you save the decisions until after the tests run. So whereas it used to be a company would make a big decision, then launch it, with A/B testing, the only decision you make is to run a 2-week test, and then the decision gets made once you know whether it improved the business or not, which is an easy type of decision to make. So I'd say lots of the skill there is knowing. There's also identifying who in the organization makes decisions, who in the organization can get things done. In the same way that we do with, when we look at a website, we're looking at the flows of visitors through different pages and trying to look at the bottlenecks on things. There's also a similar activity can be done within the organization, is to look at the last 10 projects that went live on the website and to say, what did they have in common? And what did the ones that were great ideas but never actually went live have in common? Because sometimes you find that actually the only things that go live on the site are the ones who went through this person.
Okay.
And,
so getting this internal buy-in to recognizing the decision-making process and then to convincing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And analyzing the decision-making process as a way a process engineer would, looking for. In the same way when you look at a river and you can see the main river and then the streams that lead into it and the tributaries that lead into that, thinking of the business as that in terms of things that go live and working out where the flow is within the company of things that go live. We've got a whole, internally a whole load of internal documents of techniques for getting things to happen within a company. And like an obvious, I say an obvious one that works ridiculously well, for example, is if the client has a lot of processes that stop them from putting things live in terms of compliance, then we say, okay, then what tests can we run where we literally copy and paste things that exist in other parts of the business and have already gone through compliance we'll actually create a page that's all these different parts. So compliance have already agreed to all of the materials. And so sometimes in travel or financial services, something that's quite heavily regulated, you can put a test live that would otherwise take ages in terms of getting it past compliance, just because it's already been approved. We're not actually creating new content. And there's a whole load of little techniques and strategies for making things happen in a big organization. And it's more editable.
No, I understand. This part is often underestimated, how to make things done within the organization, how to get run new things, new experiments, new optimization, how to get it in production or in testing as soon as possible. And on the other hand, let's say once you know that, for example, in your teams, when you're looking for, I saw on your page that you're looking for CRO experts. What are you looking typically in these people? What is the typical profile of a good CRO expert?
Great question.
It's a very entrepreneurial skill set, because it kind of, in the same way that an entrepreneur, a company founder, a CEO needs to be good at sales and marketing, recruitment, finance, maybe raising money, hiring and building company culture, HR, all of these things that you need to know are often sort of quite different worlds. So yeah, you need to know about direct response marketing and about good copywriting and persuasion, because your job is kind of to sell. It's to create your website's a robot salesperson that can say the right things at the right time to the right people automatically. So sales and persuasion is critical. But also, you need people that have got a good understanding of user experience, of creating usable, not just pages, but usable workflows. And it's technical. It's a technical discipline. There's A/B testing, there's web analytics, there's creating the pages themselves. So it's a tough, it's a tough gig, because you need to be you need to appreciate these disciplines, and you also need to be, an experienced practitioner in these disciplines. But the one thing that's interesting is when you pull them all together, they kind of combine to create this superpower, which not many people have, and not many companies have. And when you can pull these things together, either as an individual person, you can then go and literally double and triple businesses in a matter of months or years, or even if you can pull them together within an organization. So you get your sales team speaking to your web analysts, you get your web analysts and your sales team talking to your designers and your copywriters, and your customer service team, and you kind of build all these kind of what are typically disciplines that stand alone, and put them together. It's amazing that what kind of knowledge and experience a lot of people or organizations have if they just have the right kind of data or the right people talking to each other. So yeah, it is a multidisciplinary skill, but in the same way that being a company founder or a CEO is, it's being good at lots of things, but understanding and appreciating the importance of them.
They always tend to be like sponges, people who just constantly learn and acquire. I think everyone who we know who's great at it is constantly learning, interested in everything. Good on the science and engineering side, because engineering is building things that work, and this is building something that works. But also, you're not so much building things out of HTML. You're actually kind of building things out of thoughts and ideas, and it's working on the users. It's a psychological thing. So in some ways, it's the engineering side of building things that work, but on the other side, it's the field of human interaction and understanding people. So it's that Venn diagram. I mean, actually, weirdly, it's the same Venn diagram that Steve Jobs used to talk about a lot, of the intersection of the science, arts, and the liberal arts. And I think it's that same kind of person. If someone's great communication-wise and can make you laugh and seems to be to know everything about everything, and also is good on the analytical kind of building things and tinkering with them until they work, those people tend to, people who are great at conversion tend to have both of those, always have both of those.
No, I understand. I agree, and as I said, I think the entrepreneurial part and the sponge part, the learning parts, are two teams that you wouldn't usually expect when you ask about, but come a lot of the time, because it's really understanding the whole picture. And I see a lot of times in the industries when the people read a lot about these simple hacks and try to copy, and then we miss this whole part of real optimization, basically. So I agree.
And also people who have a respect for it. People who, it surprises us how sometimes someone would have the potential, but they don't get excited about usability, or they don't get excited about psychology, or about or design or whatever. And so there's definitely an element of that as well, that there are some people that don't get it. And I think that, I don't know, we don't know how to instill that. We can excite people about it, but some people read our book and it's like a literally life-changing event. And some people don't seem to get so excited about it and don't want to read books about this kind of thing. And I'd say that's definitely a surprisingly strong indicator, as it's almost like color blindness or something, where if someone doesn't get it straight away, then it's that's fine.
One thing that's kind of should be obvious, but it's kind of not, is most of the web has been built by, I guess, kind of technical people, or people from a technical background. But the most successful websites are built with a real empathy and understanding of the user situation. And you're so far from your users when you're designing a web page in WordPress, for example, or you're looking at a web analytics report. And I'd say the big mistake that almost everyone makes, and we've all been through this, these kind of watershed moments where we think, hang on a minute, these aren't just pixels on a graph, these aren't just users scrolling through a page. Imagine if we had 1,000 people queuing outside the door in the office right now who wanted what we offered, but for whatever reason they couldn't get it, or they weren't persuaded by it.
Get your hand out of my screen.
Yeah, I've noticed that my hand's been on the screen. You go and ask them, and the biggest breakthroughs that we have with our clients is when we immerse ourselves in the users and the user's problem and the user experience. And you kind of become, there's a whole section on the book about it, but becoming the customer and having that empathy and that understanding. And it's often something that many of us as web marketers or internet entrepreneurs, we don't do, because we are physically detached from these people.
No.
It's a really valuable skill. And that's what I mentioned earlier. My top tip to anyone working in an airline would be, get to the airport with your laptop and do some user tests, because there's no barrier to entry. You can cost nothing.
And actually, some of the best, I did a case, one company that's quite agile, Transavia, the Dutch low cost, they did exactly this. So they had these agile scrum meetings with people, they took the designers and web developers to the airport to listen to these people, because like you said, these guys are very technical and a lot get lost in translation when they get the requirements. So this, I think, was exactly the same and very good example. So
fantastic.
So one topic, let's say because I know you guys don't have that much time to talk with me, although I could talk about this for days, is the scaling part. So as I said, the second group, we addressed the first one, let's say what kind of skills, how to get the buy-in and these initial CRO pains, but the second group that I see especially the ones with the digital in the background, I see they want to run tests, but they are a little bit limited of how many they can do. And to catch up with even in the travel with the best, like Airbnb, with Ubers of the world, with Booking.coms that runs thousands of experience, this is when I think is where we sometimes struggle to take the next step. So what do you think, or your experience with the companies that, let's say maybe you guys help them, or you saw internally, that are really good at that. What do you think is a good recipe for a bigger scale of CRO?
I think the main one, people think bigger scale and immediately think more people. We actually find that often the more people who are on a project, if there are like 15 people on a project, like on the, on all the catch-up meetings, I think that often is a negative indicator of the velocity of the project.
Mm-hmm.
And in theory, it shouldn't be. There's no reason why, but there's no reason why it couldn't be both. But there's definitely a phenomenon whereby a company where large teams definitely don't, on average, work quicker. Yeah. So I think it's much more about looking at we spend a lot of time on looking at the bottlenecks for implementation in terms of, and sometimes they're technical. And when they are technical, it's either because they have technical debt on the code or that they are creating code that has technical debt. So sometimes we'll just end up like simplifying the code for the client just so they can run tests quicker.
Okay.
Sometimes it's because the tests that have been suggested have been designed without a thought as to how they can be. Sorry, and I interrupted. How they can be implemented. Sometimes, one designer could create a test that might take a month to implement, whereas one person could think, actually, I can work out a way of getting this same effect on the user using the existing, CSS styles, or just by pasting an extra sentence in somewhere. So there's a massive amount of opportunity for that. I think you were about to ask something, weren't you, before I moved on?
Yeah, no, one thing that when you said talking technical depth, and I see a lot of airlines when they say we have such a big product roadmap, always something. Do you see having a dedicated also the development team? Because this is one team that I saw having a dedicated development team for experiments, like a parallel to the product development roadmap, is something that you see and would advise.
Definitely useful. We often end up providing the development for our clients because it's quicker for us to do it.
So like an outsourced arm to do the whole thing.
Yes, we found that increasingly if we do the development, or at least get very involved with the development, the client side, then it speeds things up because we know how to implement tests that don't become huge, painful projects.
Yeah.
But definitely someone needs to be working on this. It's important. It's what's more important than being able to implement new pages when all you're running is a website. I mean, this is important stuff. This should be top priority. If we're running a test that might increase the website's conversion rate by 10%, surely that deserves. That we shouldn't be stuck for people who can code it up.
It should go without saying, but I'm going to say anyway. Obviously, getting wins is the most important thing. Because the biggest mistake we see people make is they'll go and sign a contract for some split testing software. Then they'll drag all the developers into a meeting to get the testing software set up. Then they'll get kind of go through the procurement process with their kind of legal department to get the contract signed. And then they'll initiate loads of ideas from all the colleagues of what we can test. And they'll test bad things that aren't going to massively grow the business. And what typically happens, if you just rush to get the testing software and you rush to run tests, what we often see is you'll just have no significant results. The tests will be inconclusive and they'll never end, or you'll want to run another test because everyone's just sick of waiting. And nothing actually happens that grows the business. And by far the most important thing you can do if you want to scale CRO in your organization is get winning results. Actually, create money, create value, create a better user experience, create a more profitable booking engine, whatever it might be. And once you've got measurable results, then you can use that case study to sell it internally. One of our clients in financial services went from a team of, I think there was just one guy when they originally hired us, and now he manages a team of over 100 who are their job is to, they're the conversion department. and they have different departments across different brands within the organization, across different products within the organization, and they share their case studies. They have kind of internal meetups where all the conversion team get together and they present what they're working on and what ideas they're having and what's worked and what hasn't worked within the organization. But the whole thing only comes to life really when you're creating the wins, because it's the wins that pay for you to grow the team or to grow your capabilities, to get that enthusiasm in the company to say, hey, come and have a look at what's happening over here. It's quite amazing.
No, I understand. And to get the wins, we get back to the things that you said initially, to really understand, do user research, really understand what are the key pain points and what are the key drivers to overall conversion.
Yeah,
Yes.
take the time to really create tests that are going to be kind of exceptional, and that'll pay off in terms of getting buy-in from your colleagues.
Okay.
All of a sudden, that, $100,000 that you spent on a split testing platform will seem insignificant when you've generated an extra million of profit. But when you do that, it's a lot of money.
And the opposite approach is what lots of companies do and fails, which is the my father used to be a professional photographer, and amateurs would always want to talk to him about cameras and lenses and things. And he would say, don't spend the money on a camera, whatever money you were spending on a camera, spend all that on film, which kind of shows the age of this story.
Yeah.
Spend all the money on film, take loads of photos and get things happening. And so, basically what you're missing, the reason your photos aren't better isn't because of the camera, it's because you need to develop the skills. And I'd say a good fraction of what we do these days is any company can sign up for the A/B testing software. But what really makes it successful, like the one Ben mentioned, is by helping the clients to create an in-house conversion capability, which is not about the tricks and it's not about the software or the tools. It's about building together a functional, as opposed to dysfunctional team, make websites that work. And that it's effectively like in-house, creating like a lean startup within the organization. So the company can actually, its CRO department thrives rather than what happens in lots of companies where they can't even make updates to the website without it being a huge job.
No, I agree. So maybe last thing to conclude, you told a little bit about this at the beginning. Maybe some specifics or observation from somebody from the outside our industry, like you guys, and you talked a little bit about this, let's say specific of the trial booking funnel and where we failed. You, Ben, mentioned the persuasion elements, and what I see now, the typical booking funnel of the trial where you have search results with the flights or the hotel rooms, and then they sell add-ons. And what I see, where you can really see which companies does the CRO or not, is the copy. For example, typical airline copy would be for the bag would be, you want add bags or add bag and $10, and that's all. So it's no optimization. Do you see anything else in this, let's say in the booking funnel or in the whole process that you would see specific and you would think there is way to improve it?
I would say airlines make every mistake in the book. I would say there's no one particular thing that, from the very start, there'll be people who arrive at the site and don't know exactly where they're going to go to, and the airlines typically do a bad job of that. Then people know when they're going, but they don't know exactly which dates, or they're flexible on dates, and I'd say most airlines do a bad job of that. People. The search and filtering is often painful. Working out the logistics of getting a flight is difficult because obviously people need to get to the airport beforehand and need to allow a certain amount of time. The airline websites don't help with that. The actual booking process, the seat finder is normally painful to use, and there's often like genuine glitches where you'll lose your data or don't know where you are in the process. There's all that passport stuff. I'd say that I don't think there are any stages of booking flights that aren't still. In in the usability end of this, in obviously there's the usability and then the persuasion. I would say most airline websites are still stuck on the usability side. Persuasion doesn't even, it's not even at the level where persuasion starts to come in. Because it is. Usability is almost always the basic stuff to get out of the way. In 20 years' time, or I don't know, even in 10 years' time, booking flights is not going to be anything like as painful as it is now. But I think when we look back on how how airline websites are right now, it'll just seem like almost comical in 10 years' time.
Yeah, no, I think it's in some extent. I just did one last case study on, if you look at this history of the websites, you look how Ryanair's page evolved, when basically it's completely different. It's like 5 years, 10 years ago was like a flashing billboard, and now I think some of this progress in usability, showing you where basically the schedule, the destinations that you can in this more seamless way, and then upselling stuff like bundling together services. So I think some of the things are picking up, but like you said, I think it's for a lot, like we said at the beginning, they're still stuck at the usability, and then the next thing is.
I'm just I've look at our book here, and on section 3 is making websites win, the most common problems that make website visitors abandon and proven easy to implement solutions. I've just read through all the chapters on there, and there's not a single one that doesn't apply to airlines. No, not even that. There's not a single one that I've not struggled with and failed with on an airline website. So, yeah, I don't know.
Good. So there is still a lot of work for all of us, yeah?
Fortunately.
Yeah. And there always will be, because the more successful you are at this, the more you discover opportunities to try and persuade a new segment of user, or to try and advertise with a new channel. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier one of the skills of someone that's good at conversion. I'd say one of the skills is to kind of always know that you don't create perfection. There's always more you can do to improve the user experience. There's always more you can do to be persuasive. And as customers get more demanding, they demand better experiences of us. So I guess one important aspect of doing conversion is staying humble and knowing that you've still got a long way to go, and that applies to all of us.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
if only we were all allowed to do the same thing to airports.
No, that's part of the user experience. I would say it's even much worse. Yeah, so nobody's A/B testing the experience in the security check, or.
It amazes us how so much of the efficiencies created by air travel are absorbed by inefficiencies in the airport. Planes allow us to travel thousands of miles in a matter of hours, and then quite a few of those hours are soaked up by the airport on things that aren't crafted by the same level of engineering.
No, agree, 100%.
Maybe in a future life we'll all move over onto working on that.
Yeah. No, thank you to both. I think it was great, and as I said, we'll recommend your book to everybody who wants to either start with the CRO or wants to learn more. I think it's a lot of great ideas, and looking forward to get more stuff or more interesting cases from you guys. Apart from the book, where can Digging Trail readers find your material?
It's at conversion-rate-experts.com. So if you just search for conversion rate experts, plural, then we've got a whole load of articles, and we write the articles to be useful. We write them as if we're writing to a family member who's working in-house, struggling with all this kind of thing. So we don't publish anything unless we know it works, and we know that it's and as a result we've got and that it's actually genuinely useful in terms of being worthy of people's time and worthy of implementing. And yeah, we've our followers include people from Apple, Facebook, Google, Dropbox, and all the companies that we've worked and helped to grow.
Great.
So
Great.
yeah, definitely some useful stuff in there.
Thank you very much again to both Karl and Ben, and this was great. Yeah.
It was
Great to
great.
see
Yeah,
you.
good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Istok.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.